It was a day like no other in the prestigious university's calculus class. The students filled the lecture hall, eager to dive into the complexities of math, but none could have predicted the unexpected turn their lesson would take. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur known for revolutionizing industries, had come to observe the class as a guest. Yet, the professor, Dr. Williams, a man with strong political beliefs and a disdain for the ultra-wealthy, had different plans. With a smug look on his face, he saw this as the perfect opportunity to expose Musk for what he believed he was, nothing more than a lucky businessman. With the classroom's attention on him, Dr. Williams couldn't resist the urge to challenge Musk. He took to the whiteboard, presenting an incredibly difficult calculus problem. The air in the room grew thick with tension as all eyes turned toward Elon. Would the genius inventor fall short when faced with a real academic challenge? As whispers spread among the students, they wondered, was Musk truly as brilliant as his reputation suggested, or was he about to be humiliated in front of everyone? The moment was set for an extraordinary confrontation. The tension in the room was palpable as Dr. Williams, standing confidently in front of the class, turned to Elon Musk with a smirk. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. The air felt heavy with anticipation, and all eyes were on the guest who had somehow become the center of this unexpected classroom drama. Dr. Williams, with his sharp political views and distaste for wealthy figures like Musk, believed this moment would be the perfect opportunity to expose the tech mogul as nothing more than a lucky businessman. He picked up a piece of chalk and, with a flair for theatrics, scribbled a complex calculus equation on the board, one that most students would struggle to solve. Turning toward Musk, the professor's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Well, Mr. Musk, since you're supposed to be a genius, how about you give it a try?" The challenge was clear, and the class held its collective breath, waiting to see if Musk would crumble under the pressure. Would he freeze? Stumble? Make a fool of himself in front of everyone? The students exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to expect. They had seen Musk in interviews, delivering brilliant insights about space, technology, and innovation. But here, in this academic setting, would he measure up? Elon Musk, however, remained calm. Without hesitation, he stood up, walking to the front of the class with a quiet confidence. He wasn't worried, and that was clear to everyone watching. As he took the chalk from Dr. Williams, the entire room fell into an eerie silence. Musk stood at the board, his focus unwavering, as he began to work through the equation with ease. There were no signs of doubt, no hesitation, just pure mastery. The professor's plan to humiliate Musk was starting to unravel in real time. As the chalk moved across the board, the room fell into a deep silence, and the weight of expectation pressed down on everyone. Musk, standing before the class, was working through the complex calculus equation with such ease that it seemed almost surreal. The professor had chosen this problem carefully, one that would challenge even the brightest students, and certainly one he thought would stump a businessman like Musk. But as Musk solved each step with methodical precision, the tension in the room began to shift. The students, who had been anxiously waiting to see the billionaire falter, were stunned. They had expected him to freeze up, maybe make a mistake, or at least hesitate. After all, what did Musk, someone known for building electric cars and rockets, know about advanced mathematics? But what they witnessed was something entirely different. Musk's confidence wasn't arrogant, nor was it the bravado of someone trying to prove a point. It was the quiet, focused determination of someone who had spent years immersing themselves in the subject out of pure curiosity and love for learning. The chalk in his hand moved swiftly, and with every stroke, the room seemed to hold its breath. There were no signs of uncertainty, no moments of doubt. Musk wasn't just solving the problem, he was making it look effortless, as if the equation was nothing more than a simple puzzle. Dr. Williams stood there, arms crossed, trying to maintain an air of composure. But inside, he was beginning to feel the cracks in his plan. He had believed that Musk would crumble, that the billionaire's lack of formal education in this area would reveal him as a fraud. Instead, Musk was doing the impossible, he was making the complex look simple. The professor's earlier smugness began to fade, replaced by a quiet disbelief. As the final steps of the equation fell into place, Musk stepped back from the board and turned toward the class, his expression calm, almost as if it had all been routine. The students were still processing what had just happened. They had witnessed a master at work, someone whose intellectual ability went far beyond what they had expected. Dr. Williams, unable to hide his surprise any longer, muttered something about how that was only the first equation, trying to regain some semblance of control. But the damage was done. In front of them, the legend of Elon Musk had just evolved into something much deeper, a true understanding of mathematics, not just in theory, but in practice. The moment Elon Musk finished the first calculus problem with such astonishing precision, the room seemed to exhale collectively. The students, who had been on the edge of their seats, now sat in stunned silence, their minds struggling to reconcile what they had just witnessed with their perception of the billionaire entrepreneur. But Professor Williams wasn't ready to let go of his plan. His belief that Musk was just a lucky businessman, out of his depth in the academic world, had been shattered with the ease of which Musk solved the first equation. Yet, he refused to back down. Dr. Williams was not about to let this moment slip away. His pride and reputation were on the line. He wiped the first equation off the board with a quick swipe and scrawled an even more complex problem, a mathematical monster that, in his mind, would surely break Musk. The new equation was so intricate, so daunting, that even the best students in the room might hesitate before tackling it. It was an academic trap set to expose Musk as an imposter, someone who couldn't possibly understand the deep intricacies of calculus. With a grin on his face, Professor Williams turned to Elon, his voice carrying a hint of mockery. "Let's see how you handle this one, Mr. Musk," he said, fully expecting the billionaire to falter. But Musk, unfazed, stood up once again and calmly walked to the board. This time, the energy in the room shifted again. The students were no longer just curious, they were now invested. Was Musk truly the genius he had built a reputation for? Or would this be the moment he finally showed his true colors? As Musk took the chalk in hand, the room seemed to hold its breath. The equation before him was a beast, layers of complexity, impossible variables, and mathematical nuances that could easily overwhelm anyone without years of study. But to the shock of the entire class, Musk didn't hesitate. He looked at the equation for a moment, scanning the problem with his sharp, focused gaze, and then he began to work. His chalk moved with purpose, effortlessly translating the chaos of numbers into a clean, logical sequence of steps. The minutes ticked by, but Musk's focus never wavered. As he worked, the students exchanged glances, their disbelief growing. This wasn't just an academic challenge, it was a test of Musk's true character, his intellectual depth. And as the problem started to take shape on the board, it was clear that Musk wasn't just solving it, he was showing the class how to think about the problem itself. Dr. Williams stood frozen at the front of the room, the frustration and disbelief mounting inside him. This was supposed to be his moment of victory. But instead, he was witnessing something he hadn't expected. Elon Musk, the businessman he had tried to humiliate, was turning the tables in a way no one could have predicted. Musk wasn't just solving the equations with ease, he was dismantling the professor's preconceived notions, exposing the limitations of a mindset that believed wealth and success couldn't coexist with intellectual rigor. The room was completely still now, save for the sound of Musk's chalk, the silent rhythm of someone who had been trained to think differently. As the last step fell into place, Elon stood back and surveyed his work, his expression calm and confident but not boastful. It wasn't arrogance, it was simply the quiet certainty that he had mastered the subject at hand. The students, now fully aware of the depth of Musk's brilliance, could only stare in awe. Dr. Williams had been outplayed, not just by Musk's intellect, but by his quiet humility and mastery of the subject. It was clear that the lesson had shifted from one of math to one of respect, resilience, and the power of intellectual curiosity. The professor's plan had backfired spectacularly, but what he didn't realize was that, in that moment, the real lesson was just beginning for everyone in the room. By the time Elon Musk stood back from the chalkboard, the students in the room were no longer just watching a demonstration of intellectual prowess. They were witnessing a seismic shift in their understanding of what it means to be a true genius. The air in the classroom was thick with awe and admiration, and even Dr. Williams, who had been so certain of his plan to humiliate Musk, found himself standing frozen in place, grappling with an unexpected reality. Musk hadn't just solved the impossible equation in record time, he had done it with a quiet confidence that had shattered the professor's preconceived notions. For a moment, the room was silent. The students were still processing the magnitude of what they had just seen. They had come to class expecting to learn from their professor, the man with decades of academic experience, but instead, they had witnessed someone whose genius extended far beyond business and technology. Elon Musk wasn't just a visionary in the world of electric cars or space exploration, he was, in fact, a master of the very subject they had all come to study. The realization was startling, even humbling, for many of them. Dr. Williams, who had carefully crafted his lesson to expose Musk's intellectual shortcomings, found himself at a crossroads. His ego, once so firmly tied to his role as a professor, was now shaken. His confidence had been rooted in the assumption that the world of academia was a place reserved for those who fit a certain mold, those with advanced degrees, those who had followed the traditional path of intellectual rigor. But Musk had just demonstrated that true genius wasn't confined to a single career or to any predetermined path. The professor, no longer able to maintain his smug facade, cleared his throat and tried to regain some semblance of control. He had no choice but to accept the truth, that Musk had not only solved the equation but had done so with an elegance and clarity that left everyone in the room stunned. But Dr. Williams, in a last-ditch effort to maintain his academic authority, tried to shift the focus of the lesson. He pointed to the board and, with a sharp edge to his voice, remarked, "That's impressive, Mr. Musk, but it's not just about solving problems. Education is about understanding. It's about grasping the concepts at a deeper level, not just memorizing formulas." For a brief moment, the professor's words hung in the air, as if he were trying to convince himself more than anyone else. He wanted to believe that the process of solving equations was a matter of rote memorization, of following a strict set of rules. But Elon Musk, in his characteristic way, wasn't there to argue, he was there to teach. And so, instead of retreating into silence or dismissing the challenge, Musk smiled and responded calmly, "You're right, Professor. But understanding starts with curiosity. If you're curious enough, you'll figure it out. It's not about memorizing formulas, it's about wanting to understand how things work." The students, now fully engaged, listened intently as Musk spoke. It wasn't just his intellect they were admiring, it was his humility, his willingness to admit that learning is a lifelong pursuit. Musk's response to the professor's challenge was a moment of pure wisdom. He wasn't just showing the class how to solve equations, he was showing them how to think, how to question, how to approach problems with a sense of wonder and inquiry. His words cut through the noise of academic pride and pretension, bringing the students back to the core of what education should be about: curiosity, exploration, and the pursuit of knowledge. As the class continued, Dr. Williams, despite his initial frustration, found himself reluctantly impressed. The equation Musk had just solved was no longer the focal point. What had begun as a battle of wits had morphed into something more profound, a conversation about the value of education itself. Dr. Williams couldn't deny that Musk's approach to teaching was something he hadn't seen in years, an approach that wasn't about showing off knowledge, but about empowering others to seek their own understanding. By the end of the class, the students were buzzing with excitement. They weren't just inspired by Musk's intellect, they were inspired by the way he had made learning feel alive, accessible, and relevant. They had come to class that day expecting to learn about calculus, but instead, they had been taught a much more important lesson, that true genius isn't just about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being curious, about relentlessly pursuing knowledge, and about sharing that knowledge with others in a way that makes them want to keep learning. Dr. Williams, standing at the back of the room, couldn't help but reflect on the day's events. His original plan to humiliate Musk had completely backfired. But what had happened in the classroom was far more powerful than any academic victory. Musk had shown him, and the entire class, that genius doesn't come from titles, degrees, or societal expectations. It comes from a deep, authentic curiosity and a willingness to share that curiosity with others. For the first time, Dr. Williams realized that he had learned something far more valuable than any calculus equation could ever teach. As the class session drew to a close, something remarkable had transpired. What had begun as a planned attempt by Professor Williams to publicly embarrass Elon Musk had turned into one of the most profound lessons on education, curiosity, and intellectual humility. The students, who had come to the class thinking they were going to simply learn about calculus, had found themselves on the receiving end of a much more powerful lesson. Elon Musk, the businessman they knew for revolutionizing technology and pushing the boundaries of space exploration, had transformed into something far more meaningful in their eyes: a teacher, a mentor, and an inspiration. After solving the last impossible equation and offering his insights into the deeper understanding of calculus, Musk had left an indelible mark on the students. It wasn't just the answers to the equations that mattered, it was how he had approached the entire experience. He hadn't stood before them as a figure of arrogance or self-importance, he hadn't used his fame or wealth as a shield. Instead, he had shown them what true intellectual curiosity looked like. He had demonstrated that knowledge isn't just a tool for success, but a way of viewing the world and solving its most complex problems. Musk had spoken about how math wasn't just about formulas and numbers, it was a framework for understanding the world, its movement, its changes, its mysteries. He made them see that math wasn't a chore, but a key to unlocking the universe. And as he spoke, the room transformed from a classroom of students to a room full of inspired minds ready to take on the world with a new perspective. The respect between Musk and the students had deepened. They realized that genius wasn't confined to a specific discipline. It wasn't just about mastering one's field. Instead, it was about curiosity, an unyielding drive to understand the world in ways others hadn't thought to. In a sense, Musk had shown them that the boundaries of business and academia were far more permeable than anyone had assumed. His ability to transition from a businessman to a teacher, to explain the principles of calculus with the same ease he might explain rocket science, was nothing short of astonishing. Musk hadn't just passed a test, he had opened a door for them to a broader, richer world of thinking. Professor Williams, meanwhile, had been left in a state of stunned reflection. Throughout his career, he had prided himself on his expertise in academia. He had built his reputation on the traditional academic structure, where success was defined by degrees, accolades, and decades of study. But Musk had forced him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about intelligence, success, and learning. The professor had spent years teaching students about the importance of the structure of education, of following the well-worn paths of traditional academia. But here was Musk, a self-taught polymath, who had learned calculus and physics not through institutional study, but through his own curiosity and determination. The lesson he imparted was subtle yet profound: knowledge wasn't a hierarchical system of right answers, it was a conversation, a dynamic exchange of ideas, and most importantly, a pursuit of understanding. Dr. Williams stood in silence, feeling the weight of his own assumptions begin to crumble. The academic pedestal he had put himself on was now shaky, and the humbling realization began to settle in. He had thought that intellect could only be defined by degrees or academic credentials. But what Musk had shown was that true intellect came from an insatiable hunger for knowledge. And it wasn't limited to the confines of a classroom or the pages of a textbook. True genius came from the willingness to continually learn, to challenge the norms, and to think beyond the boundaries of what was expected. When the class ended, the students didn't rush out of the room as they typically would. Instead, many gathered around Musk, eager to ask him more questions. Their conversations weren't just about the technicalities of calculus anymore, they were about Musk's approach to learning, to failure, and to success. They wanted to understand how someone with so much on his plate, with so many ventures to manage, still found the time to immerse himself in math, to engage with the world of academia in such a deeply personal way. Musk, in his characteristic humility, shared stories of his early struggles with learning, how he had never been a particularly good student but had always been curious. He explained how his passion for learning had come not from the desire to impress anyone, but from a genuine desire to understand how things worked. Curiosity, he said, is the key to everything. As he spoke, the students began to see the real value of education, not as a means to an end, but as a lifelong journey of discovery. They realized that learning wasn't just about getting good grades or passing exams. It was about challenging your assumptions, about staying curious no matter where you were in life, and about using what you've learned to make a meaningful impact on the world around you. The lessons Musk shared that day weren't just academic, they were life lessons. Professor Williams, standing off to the side, watched the students engage with Musk and couldn't help but feel a sense of regret. His initial plan to expose Musk as a fraud had backfired, but in a way, that failure had opened his eyes. He had learned more that day than in years of teaching. And as Musk prepared to leave, the professor approached him, his voice soft but sincere. "Mr. Musk," he said, "I owe you an apology. I've spent my career thinking I had all the answers. But today, you've shown me that there's always more to learn." Musk smiled warmly, his usual humility shining through. "No need to apologize, Professor," he replied. "We're all just students of the world." The final moments of that extraordinary day marked a transformative shift for everyone in the classroom, and perhaps for Professor Williams himself. What had begun as a professor's attempt to expose Elon Musk as an intellectual fraud had turned into a profound lesson on humility, growth, and the true nature of education. The students, initially skeptical and perhaps even excited to watch Musk fail, had found themselves in the presence of someone far more than a businessman. They had witnessed a man who not only excelled in his field but approached learning and knowledge with a depth of curiosity and passion that was rare even in the most prestigious academic settings. Musk had shown them that intelligence wasn't just about being the best at solving problems, it was about the willingness to ask questions, to challenge assumptions, and, perhaps most importantly, to remain humble enough to recognize that learning doesn't end with a degree or an accolade. As the class ended, a palpable shift occurred. The atmosphere in the room was no longer one of tension and competition, it had evolved into one of admiration and deep respect. The students, who had once viewed Musk as nothing more than a tech mogul, now saw him as a teacher in the truest sense. Their conversations were no longer about how a billionaire could possibly know calculus. Instead, they asked him how they, too, could foster a curiosity-driven approach to learning. They wanted to know how they could harness the same intellectual curiosity that Musk had cultivated over the years. For the first time, they understood that the real power of education wasn't just in memorizing facts and formulas, but in developing a mindset that allowed you to approach the world with open eyes, always searching for answers and never afraid to challenge the status quo. One student, a young woman who had previously doubted her own ability to succeed in math, stood up with a question that encapsulated the collective thought in the room. "Mr. Musk," she asked hesitantly, "do you think someone like me, who's not very good at math, could ever do what you do?" Her voice trembled slightly, as if unsure whether she was even allowed to ask such a question in front of the others, but it was one that had been on everyone's mind. Could they, too, reach the heights that Musk had achieved in science and business, or were those paths reserved for the geniuses of the world? Musk's response was immediate, his voice warm and encouraging. "Absolutely," he said, without hesitation. "Math isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about persistence, about curiosity. If you're willing to ask the right questions, put in the work, and stay curious, you can learn anything. Don't let anyone, yourself included, tell you what you're not capable of. That's the key." His words hung in the air, and for the first time that day, the students began to understand what real learning was about. It wasn't about being born with a natural talent or being the smartest person in the room, it was about perseverance and a deep-rooted passion for understanding the world. Musk had made it clear that his success wasn't a product of privilege or luck, it was the result of years of hard work, intellectual curiosity, and a willingness to embrace failure as part of the process. He had shown them that anyone could become an expert in a field if they were willing to dedicate themselves to the process of learning and never give up, no matter how difficult the journey might seem. In that moment, the class realized that success wasn't about conforming to the traditional definitions of intelligence set by academia or society. Instead, it was about developing a mindset that allowed you to explore the unknown, to ask difficult questions, and to seek answers even when the path forward seemed unclear. Elon Musk had made them believe that they, too, could shape the future, not just in business, but in any field they chose to pursue, by fostering a mindset of innovation and curiosity. Meanwhile, Professor Williams stood off to the side, his pride and preconceived notions slowly crumbling as he watched the students engage with Musk. The professor, who had spent years working in academia, was a man who had built his entire career around his intellectual authority and the rigid structure of education. He had assumed that the world of business and technology was far removed from the world of mathematics and higher education. But what Musk had shown him, in a matter of hours, was that the world of business, technology, and education were not mutually exclusive, they were, in fact, deeply intertwined. Musk had managed to break down the barriers between these fields, proving that intellectual curiosity and a drive for knowledge were the common threads that linked them all. For the first time in his career, Professor Williams began to question his own assumptions. He had spent his life teaching students that education was about passing exams, receiving degrees, and following a structured path. But Musk had demonstrated that the true purpose of education wasn't about conforming to a system, it was about sparking a lifelong passion for learning, and understanding that no matter how much you know, there's always more to discover. Musk's approach to teaching, which had initially shocked Williams, had now opened the professor's eyes to the limitations of his own thinking. As the students began to leave the classroom, their minds buzzing with excitement, Williams approached Musk. His pride had been bruised, but he had learned something invaluable that day. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice softer than before, "I owe you an apology. I misjudged you. I thought you were just another businessman who had made it big by sheer luck, but you've shown me that there's far more to you than meets the eye. I've spent decades in this field, teaching students that intelligence is about degrees and credentials, but today you've reminded me that it's about something far more important: curiosity, perseverance, and a willingness to keep learning. I've learned more from you in a few hours than I've learned in years of teaching." Musk smiled, his usual humility on display. "There's always more to learn, Professor. We're all just students of the world." And with that simple exchange, the classroom had come full circle. The students had left with a renewed sense of purpose, not only about math but about life itself. They had learned that true genius didn't come from following a traditional path, it came from the courage to ask questions, challenge norms, and most importantly, stay curious. And as for Professor Williams, his perspective had shifted in a way that he would never forget. He had walked into that classroom with the intention of proving Musk wrong, but by the end of the day, he had discovered that sometimes, the most valuable lessons come from the most unexpected places. As the final moments of the class unfolded, the shift in the room was palpable. The initial tension had melted away, replaced by a sense of awe and respect. For the students, this wasn't just another math lecture. It wasn't just a showcase of Elon's technical prowess or his ability to solve complex equations faster than anyone had expected. It was a deep, introspective lesson about what real education is all about. They had come into the class thinking they would witness a battle between a billionaire businessman and a tenured professor. But what they got was something far more profound, a glimpse into the true essence of learning. The students now realized that Elon Musk was not just some high-flying entrepreneur detached from the world of intellectual inquiry, he was an embodiment of what it meant to be a lifelong learner. His approach to education wasn't about checking off boxes or earning accolades. It wasn't about proving yourself against others. Instead, it was about curiosity. The thirst for knowledge. The ability to look at the world, ask hard questions, and work tirelessly to find the answers. It was about applying that knowledge to create real-world change, to push boundaries, and to make the impossible possible. Musk had shown them that intelligence wasn't a fixed trait. It wasn't reserved for those who scored highest on tests or received the most prestigious degrees. It was for those who were willing to dig deeper, to question everything, and to keep challenging themselves, even when faced with overwhelming odds. The students understood now that the real power of education came from an insatiable desire to learn, and that it wasn't something that could be measured by grades or certificates. True education was about the freedom to explore, to make mistakes, and to grow. One of the most profound moments came when a young woman, who had once considered herself not good enough in math, raised her hand and asked Musk if someone like her could ever achieve what he had achieved. Musk's response wasn't just reassuring, it was empowering. "Absolutely," he said. "Math is not about being the smartest in the room. It's about being persistent, staying curious, and never letting anyone, including yourself, tell you that you can't do something. It's about asking the right questions and pushing the boundaries of what you think is possible." Those words lingered in the air long after the class had ended. The students didn't just leave that day with a better understanding of calculus, they left with a newfound belief in themselves and in the power of learning. They left with the realization that anyone could achieve greatness, not because of where they started, but because of the mindset they cultivated along the way. And perhaps most importantly, they left with the understanding that learning wasn't about fitting into a mold or following a prescribed path. It was about finding your own way, asking the tough questions, and staying curious enough to discover the answers, no matter where they might lead. For Professor Williams, the day had been an unexpected turning point. What started as a challenge to prove Musk wrong had evolved into a humbling lesson on what true intelligence looks like. He had spent his career in academia, preaching the importance of knowledge and education, but Musk had shown him something deeper, that education, at its core, was about inspiration, about opening minds and hearts to the possibilities that lay beyond the confines of traditional thinking. As the students gathered around Musk, asking more questions about his life and work, Williams realized that he, too, had learned a lesson far beyond the classroom that day. The world of academia and business were not separate realms, but rather, they intersected in ways that could create something greater than either could alone. In the end, Musk hadn't just solved a few calculus problems, he had opened up a whole new way of thinking about learning and success. And that, in the end, was the most valuable lesson of all. The story of Elon Musk's surprising display of mathematical genius in a college calculus class offers several profound lessons. First, it teaches us that intelligence is not confined to one specific field or set of credentials. Musk, a renowned entrepreneur, demonstrated that true understanding goes beyond business acumen, it stems from curiosity, persistence, and a willingness to learn. His response to Dr. Williams' challenge showed that knowledge isn't just about memorizing facts, it's about problem solving, critical thinking, and applying what you know to real-world situations. Second, the story highlights the importance of humility. Dr. Williams, who initially sought to humiliate Musk, ended up learning from him instead. It serves as a reminder that we should never underestimate others based on their background or success. Everyone has something valuable to teach us if we remain open-minded and curious. Lastly, the story emphasizes the transformative power of education. Learning is not about following a traditional path or seeking validation, it's about exploring new ideas, pushing boundaries, and never giving up. Elon Musk's story challenges us to embrace our curiosity, to question the status quo, and to value the pursuit of knowledge above all else.